Hey guys, all right, let's talk about last night's episode of The Originals. And I actually really liked this episode. In my last review, I had been talking about how I couldn't really get behind this show because they really want me to now start rooting for Klaus and start rooting against Marcel. And I just found that after our history with the Vampire Diaries, I couldn't do it. But this episode focused a lot around Elijah. Thank God. He is absolutely the saving grace of this show. There's something about the way this actor portrays Elijah. It's amazing. And even when he was on the Vampire Diaries, it was the same way. He's not over the top. He's not always threatening somebody. He's just slow and calm, and his presence on screen is amazing. So this episode took us back to why Davina, who is a witch, hates her people, and why Marcel banned the witches from doing witchcraft in New Orleans. So there was I guess it all stems back to the ancestral witches, and every 3 centuries they do this thing called the harvest. And in the harvest, they have to basically sacrifice these witches, and then they have a reaping, and then apparently the witches are supposed to come back to life, and then the witches will get the ancestral power. But when the ritual was happening, the 4 girls who were supposed to be sacrificed didn't realize that they were actually going to be killed. And when it happened, there was mad hysteria everywhere. And Davina was one of those witches, and she ended up being saved by Marcel. Now, the reason Marcel knew that this was happening was because Sophie Devereaux at the time, she was kind of like a baddie. She didn't really do what the witches told her to do, and she was actually hooking up with Marcel. And she was telling Marcel everything that was going on. And so when this actually happened, he came in, he saved Davina, and that is now why she calls Marcel her family, and he's been keeping her up in the attic of the church. We also found out in this episode that the priest is the uncle of Cami, and that is the twin of Sean, who in last week's episode we found out he ended up killing all these people and then killed himself. And what we found out in this episode is that he was actually there was a hex put on him. So that he would do this, and then they would, this would be why they felt that they needed to do this sacrifice. And so basically they played on the priest, and they killed his nephew. So we find out all this information through Marcel. So Davina is telling this story to Elijah, and Marcel is telling his side of the story to Klaus. And it's a good scene. These two obviously have a lot of history together because Klaus is ultimately the one who turned Marcel. And it's a nice relationship between the two in this scene, even though they're both basically playing one another. So later on in the episode, we find out that the priest and Marcel made this deal that he would allow Marcel to keep Davina up in the attic because he was going to be protecting everybody. But now, Marcel's getting a little bit greedy. The priest isn't liking that, and him and the priest are kind of going at it and having words with one another. And this is the episode where Marcel finds out that Cami is the priest's uncle, and Marcel's not happy about it because the priest is basically saying, I have control of the humans, and I want you to stay away from my niece. And he's like, fine, who's your niece? And then he finds out that it's Cami, and he's a little bit upset about that. But to me personally, I do not think that this relationship triangle that they're trying to form between Klaus, Marcel, and Cami has any weight. I don't see any chemistry between Cami and Marcel. Where I do see some chemistry is between Marcel and Rebecca. I mean, those two on screen together, whoa. They had a nice scene where, they were basically face to face, and they're basically going at each other, threatening one another. You don't want to make me mad, and he's all like, you don't want to make me mad, and they're like this close to each other. And I'm just saying, okay, y'all need to kiss because you two look hot together. So this episode was actually really good, and it seems like now there is a bond forming between Elijah and Davina, because he said, listen, if you let me go, I will give you my mother's basically all of her books with all like the witches' secrets inside, so she can learn how to control her power. Because what happened was when the three girls before her were killed, all of their powers went to Davina, and so she's got like basically the power of four witches, and so she can't control it all the time. And he basically says, "Listen, I have all these books that can help you. If you let me go, I'll give them to you." So there's this really great scene where she pretends to leave with Marcel because Marcel was like, "Listen, I'm getting you out of town before this harvest happens." And she pretends that she can't control her powers, and she's like, "I need to go back into the room, something's wrong." And so he takes her back to the room, and it was basically a play so that she could honor her agreement with Elijah. So Elijah gets set free, and he heads home back to Klaus and Rebecca. And of course, Haley's there. And like I said before, there seems to be this little budding thing going on between Haley and Elijah that happened in the very first episode. Because Elijah, like I said, he is basically the central moral ground of this show. And he has a heart, he has feelings. All he does is love his family. And when he found out that Haley was pregnant, he was basically like, "I'm going to do everything I can to protect you and your baby." And she actually felt like he meant it, unlike Klaus, who's basically like, "Look, that's my baby in there. You don't go nowhere." And that's it. And so there's like a bond happening between the two. So when they see each other, you can see that there's some sparks happening. And she slaps him, and he's all like, "What the heck did I do? I haven't even been here for 3 episodes." And she's just like, "Next time, like, don't lie to me," or something like that, or "keep your promises," or something to that effect. And then she like walks away, and he basically has his hand on his cheek, and he's all like, "Oh, this girl's gonna be interesting." So I'm liking that there's a little bit of a budding relationship going there. I'm liking that Rebecca and Marcel have a budding relationship there. Klaus, he can have Cami, but I don't know. I don't really see a romantic relationship between the two of them either. But Klaus is just you just need to get rid of him. He's my least favorite character right now. But last night's episode was much better. We got a nice history as to what happened in New Orleans, and this all happened 8 months ago. And we basically find out that one of the witches that was sacrificed was Sophie's niece, and she was best friends with Davina. So she basically told her sister that no matter what it takes, I am going to finish this sacrifice, even if I have to kill Davina myself, and so that they can get her niece back. So in order for her niece to come back, Davina has to die. So it gave us some something to look forward to. Not just, oh, is Klaus going to be back in power of New Orleans? Who cares about that? This is where the story is. So good episode, back on track, and I can't wait for next week's episode. All right, guys, thanks for watching my review, and I'll see you next week.